Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. So today, wanted to kind of go over one. We just had a full moon in Cancer yesterday, and definitely still feeling that energy today. Usually, you feel the full moon at least for the next couple of days or so, and even leading up to it. Other things on the docket for today also include discussing a little more about the secrets of tarot. Last week we spoke a little bit about something called the Wheels of Becoming. I've been reading a book by an author named Barbara G. Walker, and she goes into the origins and history, some esoteric knowledge that is really fascinating in terms of understanding the deck as a whole. So we'll discuss a little bit about that. And a very specific topic around that called the trump cards. This is focused around the major arcana, and yeah, I'm really excited to just bring this knowledge and share, things that I'm learning along the way, as it relates to understanding the cards themselves. So, well, thank you guys for tuning in today. Let's get started by first setting some grounding energy. And yeah, I hope you guys, especially with this full moon in Cancer, and there's also Mars retrograde occurring at the same time. So there is a lot of, probably a lot of agitation maybe being brought up, some inner emotional things being brought up. I mean, most full moons do bring this out in us typically, but this specifically in Cancer, and Cancer being a water sign is super emotional. And if you know anything about Cancer overall, it is symbolized by a crab, so we may feel a little crabby. Cancer also rules things related to home, partnerships, maybe nourishment, family. So things like that could also be impacted during this time, in terms of whatever might be coming up for you. So yeah, let's start by doing the classic grounding moment with some tuning forks. This is just beautiful way to start and tune in and tap into ourselves. So here we go. Lovely. All right. So, yeah, let's get started, and talk about something called, or revisiting this topic called the Wheel of Becoming. I apologize for anyone if this is a little blurry. It was just like a photo I took from my phone, and I can't tell right now what it totally looks like, for you guys. But just a refresher for anyone who is interested in tarot, or you may need a little familiarity to kind of understand this. But essentially, in this book, I found this amazing graph or image that kind of describes the major arcana. It can be broken up into two sections, really. You can see that the Wheel of Becoming is really two separate wheels. that also form into infinity sign. And if you're like me and really into symbology, you're obviously probably why you're here, listening to some more information on tarot. But yeah, essentially the wheel itself represents some really interesting things, but you can see it as two different cycles. The top half is the cycle of life. It's where you first start out. And then the bottom half is more around the cycle of death, or the inner. So you can kind of see them as solar versus lunar, so the sun and the moon. Obviously, if you think about the sun and the moon as it relates to even astrology or the tarot cards, they do have to do with, you know, your outer world and your inner world, how you express yourself, how you want to be seen to some level, but also your inner world is your emotions. There's a lot that goes on in there that's not really shown to other people. So it's a really interesting way to kind of think about the different cards in tarot and how they can be separated into, starting, you know, again, the tarot deck starts with the Fool, which is numbered 0. And then it goes all the way around to, if you can look at this deck specifically, or this image specifically, when it reaches 20 is the Wheel of Fortune, and that is the end of the first cycle. And then it starts up again, or that, you know, marks the next start of the coming, well, it's the end of that cycle, and then it goes into Strength, which is number 11. And more than likely, in all our modern decks, Strength is swapped, I believe, with Justice, actually. So it looks a little bit different for us in the modern decks, but it's very interesting how things can change over time. And something to note here, and a big topic I wanted to review today, is around a notion called trump cards. So trump cards are taking, let's just say, something from a card from the top half and marrying it with a card from the bottom half. A great example of this, you can see where the cards actually intersect between both sections. One is the Wheel of Fortune, which is card number 10. And then it ends with the World at 21. So these cards are, let's just say, related to each other. The Wheel of Fortune is how, you know, if you think of the Wheel of Fortune, it's like karmic cycles, and the World is like when you've come out and broken through all of that and can really reap in the love and the benefit from the world and the universe. So it's interesting to see that intersection in this diagram. But yeah, I do have quite a few, or just a few trump card examples I wanted to review today. So let's get to it. So the first two cards are the High Priestess and the Moon. So if you're familiar with the High Priestess, I'll actually put it a little closer because I don't know if my camera does an amazing job. The High Priestess, I mean, you know, duh, my name, my username. The High Priestess is a very, let's just say, she's come up for me many times when I first started tarot, and it was, you know, for me to a message for me to deep dive into more of my spirituality. But yeah, she rules, you know, the, let's just say, in between the physical realm and the underworlds. You see all these different interesting symbology with her. You see these pomegranates behind her on a curtain. Also could, you know, if you're familiar with where the pomegranate also shows up, the pomegranate shows up, or is a prominent symbol in the story of Persephone, when she ate a pomegranate and then was bound to Hades, the underworld. So it's a really interesting way to think about the underworld. You could also see um, in her card, the moon is below her, which we'll get into why she's also tied to the moon. Um, and yeah, there's so much more here to really be spoken about. The B and J really represents duality. You can see the dark and light, feminine, masculine. There's a lot to be said about duality overall. Um, and then she's also, like, if you look even closer, you'll see that she's holding a scroll. It says the Torah. Obviously, this can be interpreted in many ways. I think it really has to do with some older, um, let's just say, older linking to what maybe the older decks really meant, which I'll also get into today as well. So, yes, that is a high priestess. She is related to the moon, as you can see here. Maybe this is a little easier to see. And the moon is, around emotions. You can see there's a scorpion that exists there. I like to, when I see scorpions, I think of obviously the sign of Scorpio, and Scorpios are very emotional. They can be kind of, I'm a Scorpio myself. They can be very stingy, or however you want to think about them, but really loving and really tapped into their selves and emotions. There are two dogs barking at what you can see is the moon, but also is split into, let's just say, another resemblance of duality. So again, the high priestess, represents a card in the first half of the wheel, and then, which is the outer world, and the moon is the trump card related to the high priestess, and rules emotion. So really, the way I see these two cards is the high priestess, asks us to tap into our inner intuition, while also having some delicate balance with how we act. There's a lot of duality in this card. And then also is linked to the moon, which really rules emotions. So that's how I kind of see trump cards, is like where within, once you've completed a cycle related to the first card, where does it show up again? Where by trump is more so like where do we, or can we conquer that first card into something else? So I see the moon as, conquering our emotions. So I brought something up just a moment ago about the high priestess holding a book, or let's just say a scripture called the Torah. Oh, Zara, hello. Happy New Year and happy Mars Day. It's been a while and it's so nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, I took a bit of a break at the end of the year, so I'm feeling very refreshed, and I'm finally diving back to doing this every Tuesday, every Mars Day again. So planning on sharing, a lot that has to do with some learnings, especially as I've been diving a little deeper into the history and secrets of tarot. So we're talking about trump cards and relating things from, let me just go back really quick, since I think there are a couple of new people who joined. Something called the Wheels of Becoming. And basically, the top cycle of cards relate to our outer world, and the lower half relates to our inner world. So you think of solar. The top half is solar power, there's sun, the lower half, moon, inner emotions. So it's been really interesting to kind of see and also read in this new book that I've been reading, about how these cards are related, in terms of taking a card from the top half and joining it or seeing where the cycle links out in the bottom half. So I have a few examples that I want to go through today. And the first one was really around the High Priestess and the Moon. Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Family, always during the holidays. So a part of this, I guess, let's just say book that I've been reading, Barbara Walker also created her own deck that kind of just brings out a little more about the history of tarot. So something fascinating about that, that I mentioned on the last stream that I did, was around how tarot is actually initially used to help illiterate people, which back then majority of the world did not know how to read, learn about the cycles of life and death and also deities. And also back in ancient times before Catholicism became the, let's just say, official religion, there there was a lot more worship around the feminine, so more in and so in more modern decks I think we'll see things that are a little more related to the masculine, call it patriarchy, call it whatever you want, or just things progressing over time or digressing, however you want to see it. But I just find it really fascinating to review different symbology and kind of just look at different cards, especially, there are many different oracle decks that exist out there, and some of them may help a little more with how you read the symbols or do the readings themselves. So anyway, back to, okay, the High Priestess. Let me see if I can get this in here. So I was talking about the different symbology pieces here, but the one thing that really stuck out to me was the Torah. And the reason for this is because, and I'll show you these cards like side by side. Hopefully I can get it in this camera view here. I guess I'm not doing an amazing job. This camera view is not great. I guess I'll just show, sorry about this. Okay. I will show you the card. I'll hold it up so you can see. So in this tarot deck, which is referenced in this book, again, it's her interpretation of things that are related to more ancient times. The High Priestess was actually called the Papist. Interesting, you could see like the resemblance in both cards, the pillars, the book, obviously the veil in the background. So the veil in the background obviously represents the underworld. Similarly enough, same with the, pomegranates in the more modern Rider-Waite deck. What I found to be fascinating reading about this actually was that one interpretation of this card, the Papist, was around the figure Mary Magdalene. So in if you're I think the general notion of Mary Magdalene is that, she's a prostitute that was a devout follower of Jesus, but there's a lot more to her story. If not to say Da Vinci Code really totally took the wheel, like, perfectly describes what the story is, and who honestly knows what the story is. But there are other, stories around Mary Magdalene. And one of the biggest ones is that she was a part of, she was a high initiate, a part of a society called Isis. And a lot of what Isis, I won't get so in depth with it, but let's just say a lot of what Isis really is a society to help, or let's just say it's magic society, that practice, I don't want to say practice magic, but they practice some level of magic. And if you're familiar with Kundalini or seeing, that symbol of the caduceus, that is the joining of the feminine and the masculine, reaching enlightenment, right? So what's interesting about the papists and thinking about Mary Magdalene was that she was, being a high initiate herself, was a really big symbol and one that helped teach others all these different methods. So it's fascinating because I do see the high priestess, and now having this deeper knowledge, I do see the high priestess as an invitation to tap into your inner self and your intuition. So it's really, really cool to be like, oh, Mary Magdalene, you know, that's a really interesting interpretation there. So yeah, that I found that to be super, super fascinating. And then let's see. I also have the moon here. So this is the moon from this other deck. And it's very, honestly, almost like very, very similar to the moon in the current modern deck. I guess the only difference would be the scorpion versus the crab. But again, crab and scorpion are like kind of similar, even though if you were to think of astrology signs, Cancer and Scorpio are very different, but they both still are very emotional beings, and also ask us to tap into our emotions. So yeah, I think, you know, these cards are pretty similar, just different ways that they have been symbolized. So that is the first, let's just say, set of cards that I wanted to share in terms of the connection of the trump cards. I have a couple other ones. So just give me a second. I'm gonna have some water. I think I might have drank too much coffee today. Okay. These are interesting, so I'm going to actually put them out together because they're somewhat related. Again, I'm gonna try to see if I can. Sorry, I'm gonna see if I can try to squeeze in 4 cards here because these are super, super interesting to see in general. Because they're somewhat related. And I guess maybe I'll just talk about them and pull them up individually. Okay, cool. So the next set of cards I wanted to talk about was the Emperor and the Hierophant as it relates to the Tower and the Devil. Okay, this is where things get really interesting for me because I've probably shared this on almost most streams that I have done about my background and why tarot itself, but astrology as well, fascinates me so much. It is in my birth chart, but essentially there's a whole thing around, like, you know, how I mentioned over time patriarchy progressed and certain things have become more masculine, but a lot of things that are influenced is actually, you know, and why tarot is so interesting is because a lot of it is pre the whole pre-Catholicism becoming the official religion. So I don't know, I guess like tapping more into what you'd call pagan, different religions, but it's also interesting to hear about the symbology in which what these messages were kind of saying, because I think a lot of it also evolved with keeping in mind what was going on with the church. So if you're interested in this like esoteric knowledge and history, know a little bit about like the Knights Templar and those secret societies that kind of just kept these, let's just say, hidden religions or things like that over time, and they carried it out in different architecture, so different churches. But it also kind of exists in this tarot deck as well, which is really cool. So, the Emperor. When you think of the Emperor, The emperor rules, let's just say, authority, also rules discipline. Um, and you can see that there's, some Aries. He's sitting on a throne of Aries, horns. You think of Aries, Aries are very strong willed. So interesting. The Emperor in this older deck is a little bit different, but similar enough. Still, the Emperor is a ruler. I don't know so much about like the bird that's on the shield here, but something that I learned about the Emperor is how it was actually. It kind of almost looks like he is, in addition to a ruler, rules some type of like army, given the shield next to the throne. What this in this older deck is representing is actually the state, an authority that is being ruled. And what's fascinating about the Emperor, is right before the Hierophant, which, in older times or in this other deck, he was actually called the Pope. And the Pope did exist, then. But yes, you kind of think of the Hierophant and the Pope as a religious figure. Again, it has to do with order. And they also fall chronologically next to each other. What's fascinating about these two cards, as it relates to the Tower, is, the Tower. You could think of the Tower, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. There's people falling out of a burning building. You could kind of relate it to the Tower of Babel when all things broke into different, let's just say, I won't get so into that one, but I have so much knowledge that I'm like, it's a lot, that can break into, I mean, the story is that, lightning struck and it broke all of, let's just say, those in this tower and turned into different languages. But other interpretations of this, is as it relates to this deck, is that the Emperor and the Hierophant, let's just think about this of ancient times. The church and state were, even though today we're, in at least in the United States, church and state are separate. Back then it kind of wasn't. And you think about let's just say, the force of Catholicism and Christianity on different areas, of the world, not just Rome, but it started in Rome and just, dispersed everywhere else. And so what's interesting that these exist in the deck is that, they're related to the Tower because it was also called the House of God. And what's fascinating is that the church, it was prophesized, if you're thinking about, things happening in the outer realm and what happens in the inner realm. This trump card of the House of God actually represents these things falling apart. So that is bringing more truth, even though it looks like a destructive card, it's actually, with any type of destruction comes new opportunities. That's kind of how you typically read the card, but as it relates to, again, how, the outer world is relating to the inner world, is that, oh, how interesting, the Emperor, which is the state, the Hierophant, which is church, could potentially fall down. And I think this is fascinating, as people in their individual journeys kind of, may break away from what, they initially were told or thought. So I found that interesting that this was actually snuck into the card, or the deck, sorry. Something also interesting, because I haven't actually totally examined it so deeply, but you could actually see the Pope and the Emperor falling out of the tower. So it is something that um, is meant to break, all of that rule and logic and forcing of belief. So fascinating. One last one before we get into the full moon spread is the Hierophant, or the Pope, also linked with the devil. So let's see if you can see this here. I'll just pull these up one by one. The Hierophant has this, like, it's holding this like peace sign up. And what's really fascinating is the devil also has a very similar hand. So these are supposed to be trump cards. And again, similar to how I was just talking about the emperor and the pope relating to the house of God, the pope or the Hierophant relating to the devil. It's really, another, it's almost like exact in a way. It's kind of crazy because it's not just the like hand gesture, it's also the people kneeling below each figure. So it's kind of fascinating to even think about the Pope as it relates to the devil, because you think about, and it's like these like hidden messages that are just so interesting, but you think about the Pope and this force of, this force of religious conformity, and then you think of the devil, and the why that could be related is that there's a darkness there, and really not to get so deep into all this alternative esoteric stuff, but yeah, there's definitely some darkness in this type of let's just say forcing of beliefs. So yeah, I mean, obviously these, just knowing this stuff or these different facts doesn't necessarily mean that it's like, oh, this is how you bring it in a reading. But I just really love learning about this stuff, so I wanted to share like just how we think about tarot. Yeah, so that concludes the let's just say the trump card associations. Let's see how we're doing with time. Nice. Okay. I'm trying to stream for longer, but by longer I mean like 40 minutes, so, or 45 minutes at most. I wanted to check in about the full moon. Let's see. I did already do a poll this week, so I wanted to share that with you guys. But yeah, the full moon in Cancer happened just yesterday. It's interesting how the moon in general has such a impact on us. I don't know if you guys feel it too, but usually leading up to the full moon especially, I honestly can't sleep. So it's really interesting. But yes, the full moon being in Cancer, Cancer is such an emotional sign. We could feel a little crabby. There could be some, let's just say, things coming up related to family, to our home life, ourselves, our emotions, like whatever's been coming up. I actually had, I do quite a bit. I mean, I don't want to call it dream work, but I have, for the last over a year or so, been tapping more into my dreams. It's something I've always wanted. I've done it almost as like a teenager or somewhat in middle school, which is like a very long time ago. But I have been tapping more into my dreams and have been really trying to, one, write them down, but, see what comes up. And it was really interesting how vivid it was, especially that night leading into the full moon. Even though I couldn't sleep. But the moments that I did, the dream was insane. And it did have to do with family specifically. It was emotional. It was like one of those dreams that I don't know if you guys ever get here, but one of those dreams where you get super emotional and start crying in the dream and wake up like physically crying. So those are super, super deep. And it's really fascinating to really reflect on it. But yeah, so I hope you're, doing some self-care around the full moon and just taking time and not totally reacting super hard if something does come up, because it can be a lot. Okay, so let's quickly do this. This was my poll. So usually for the full moon, I usually do a very common poll. Usually it's actually just one card. If I'm feeling more, I'll do more. And what I was asking for was like, what can I let go of or release? But while I was shuffling, these two cards actually fell out. So obviously when things fall out, it's like to me, I see it as a sign from the universe to just move forward with whatever that is. So I kind of read these. Actually, I see this as the letting go card. The Four of Pentacles. As you can see, the this person is holding on to a coin while trying to balance and stand on top of other coins. This really relates a lot. I've been thinking a lot about my financial stability. I love where I'm at, but I'm also like in this place of like I want to find, a way to do something that is really linked to my passion, and so I think it's what this card really was telling me was to let go of this like need to have, one, these two things married to each other, and that it will come. I can feel it coming, actually. It's like in these little small opportunities that don't necessarily mean money, but I've been doing a lot more tarot stuff, not just here I mean, I'm trying to do it more consistently this year, but I've been trying to help friends do more of a deep dive for them to understand themselves, how to use tarot. And I might even be doing a workshop soon. I was kind of called recently by a friend who is a pole dancing instructor, and might kind of do a really cool pole dancing tarot reading workshop. So I'm really excited about that. Anyway, I think this card really means like to let go of this like fixation of like what my passion with finance is, and that the universe will really let me, like it will come. And then the Queen of Wands. I mean, damn, speaking about creativity, I see this as a card of calling in. The Queen of Wands, she's very much related to Leo, very fiery. Also holding the sunflower is related to like fertility and life energy. And I think really just telling me to just not give a shit and do the things that I really enjoy. So a part of that is, really honing in on this creative energy and spurt of energy that I've been feeling recently. So with that tarot stuff, I'm really excited, but also, one of my intentions this year was just to create more with my hands. So I even started crafting again. I took out my sewing machine for the first time in years. Because I just love working on that stuff. So really this reading and this spread was really just, a clear message to hone in and just have fun with it and be whoever I want to be, and kind of just not stay so fixated on linking those two. So yes, I'm very, very excited to see where this, year will take me, especially now that I actually have some energy. Last year was a really challenging year health wise, and I've been on this, let's just call it this health program, this holistic natural health program for quite some time now. I'll be reaching a year in April, and I really have turned a corner. Just even in the last month, maybe even month and a half, I feel like a different person from last year. I remember last year around this time, I was like a dead person. So it's cool to see how staying very dedicated to something and seeking it out rather than wanting a quick fix, And I think that's also what this spread is saying, is just like, it's just be patient. It will come. Okay, so with that, I would love to kind of end this. I know we're nearing 45 minutes. Kind of just end this today with a message for today. So let's just see what the universe kind of wants to tell us. What is today's message? How can we kind of move forward with all this amazing energy that we've exchanged on this stream today? Oops. That would happen. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh yeah. All right. The Nine of Wands reversed. So the Nine of Wands really is this person who is working really hard through this creative process, but is a little beaten up. So I think it's really just a sign of persistence, and not letting where that, I don't know, those challenges kind of come in our way. I think, yeah, it's really, it's close to, let's just say, the completion of the cycle. And so it's really just not letting ourselves get in the way of our own creative process. Yes, that resonates a lot. And I hope, you can take that message with you, and not get too caught up in what the output will be, how hard it's been, maybe taking time to rest if you need to, but knowing that the universe has some great things in store for us. So anyway, thank you so much for joining today. I'll be back on next week, to continue this weekly sharing of knowledge and tarot and all the good things. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.